My name is John Moore and I will be your MC. The reason for this event is to honor all veterans of the Vietnam War. We also honor the residents of the Butler VA in attendance and all veterans. We salute the VA security and the Butler County Sheriff's Department law enforcement officers. I'll now read a list of the Gold Star family members that are probably around the grounds here somewhere, around these beautiful grounds. The Kisner family will be ringing the bell. Betty Wagner, Janet Stetson fan, Evelyn Bump, Teresa Guthrie, Mary Jane Double, Phyllis Lee, Sheila Steitner, Stanley Sitzowitz, Marcia Waring, Lynn Bear, Janet Moeller, Jim Stansko, and Cheryl Stahl. We also have some members of the Harry Martin family with us. These are Gold Star family members. The AVTT Traveling Wall is a mission of honor, respect, remembrance of our fallen and serving men and women in uniform for those without the means to travel to our great national memorial. Give it the respect it has earned, and remember that this entire area is a non-smoking area. A few interesting wall facts. A Vietnam veteran came up with the idea for the memorial. Jan Scruggs was an infantry corporal who wanted a place to commemorate all those who served and sacrificed their lives in Vietnam. The wall was designed by a college student. Her name is Maya Yenning Lin, and she was an undergraduate of Yale University at the time. There were more than 1,400 entries submitted to a national design competition, and a panel of 8 anonymous judges chose Lynn's design. It took less than 8 months to build the memorial. The site's groundbreaking took place on March 26, 1982, and the wall was completed by late October. The wall was dedicated on November 13, 1982. The wall was made of black granite from Bangalore, India. The country is one of only 3 places in the world, Sweden and South Africa, where you can get such a large amount of black granite. No federal funds were needed to create the memorial. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund raised nearly $9 million through private contributions from corporations, foundations, unions, veterans, and civic organizations. More than 275,000 individual Americans also contributed. There are currently 58,479 names listed on the wall. The names are arranged chronologically by date of casualty. More than half of the people listed on the wall are under 22. The largest group is made up of 19-year-olds. The name of 8 women appear on the wall. They nursed the wounded. The number killed in the first day in Vietnam, 997. By comparison, 1,448 soldiers were killed on their last day in Vietnam. The state with the largest casualty rate per capita belongs to West Virginia. The names of 711 West Virginians appear on the wall. The day with the most casualties was January 31st, 1968. There were 245 lost that day. This was the first day of the Tet Offensive. The wall was made up of 2 246-foot 9-inch long walls. The walls are sunken into the ground with earth behind them. At the highest point where they meet, they are 10.1 feet high and they tapered to a height of 8 inches at their extremities. Symbolically, this is described as a wound that is closed and healing. When a visitor looks at the wall, their reflection can be seen simultaneously with the engraved names, which is meant to symbolically bring the past and present together. Each wall has 72 panels. Of the 58,479 listed, approximately 1,200 of these are listed as missing MIAs, POWs, and others. Directions at the each end or nearby podiums can be used to locate specific names. The names are listed in chronological order on panel 1E, starting at the apex in 1959, moving day by day to the end of the eastern wall at 70 East, which ends on May 25th, 1968. Starting again at panel 70 West at the end of the western wall, which completes the list of May 1968, and returning to the apex at panel 1 West in 1975. There could be as many as 38 names of personnel who survived, but through clerical errors were added to the list of fatalities provided by the Department of Defense. Offerings are left at the memorial every day, from dog tags, photographs, even a motorcycle. All items are in a storage facility in Maryland, not open to the public. Some items are put on view to a public as part of a traveling exhibit. At this time, we're going to have the national anthem sung by Hannah Bossinger. All that can, please rise. We will all join in, and Hannah will lead us when she's through with the national anthem with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Hannah. We'll now have the POW MIA ceremony. Bill McNutt of the Riders will narrate what each fold means.
Members should remove their caps during this service. Those who have served and those currently serving in the uniformed services of the United States are ever mindful that the sweet, enduring peace has always been tainted by the bitterness of personal sacrifice. We are compelled to never forget that while we enjoy our daily pleasures, there are others who have endured and may still be enduring the agonies of pain, deprivation, and imprisonment. Before we begin our activities, we pause to recognize our POWs and MIAs. We call to your attention to this small table, which occupies a place of dignity and honor. It is set for one, symbolizing the fact that members of our armed forces are missing from our ranks. They are referred to as POWs and MIAs. We call them comrades. They are unable to be with their loved ones and families, so we join together to pay humble tribute to them and to bear witness to their continued absence. The table is small, symbolizing the frailty of one prisoner alone against his or her suppressors. The tablecloth is white, symbolic of the purity of their intentions to respond to their country's call to arms. The single rose in the vase signifies the blood they may have shed in sacrifice to endure the freedom of our beloved United States of America. This rose also reminds us of the family and friends of our missing comrades who keep their faith while awaiting their return. The red ribbon on the vase represents the red ribbons worn on the lapels of the thousands who demand, without yielding determination, a proper account of our comrades who are not among us. A slice of lemon on the plate reminds us of their bitter fate. The salt sprinkled on the plate reminds us of the countless fallen tears of families as they wait. The glass is inverted. They cannot toast us at this time. The chair is empty. They are not here. The candle is reminiscent of the light of hope which lives in our hearts to illuminate their way home, away from their captors, to the open arms of a grateful nation. The American flag reminds us that many of them may never return and have paid the supreme sacrifice to ensure our freedom. Let us pray to the Supreme Commander that all our comrades will soon be back within our ranks. Let us remember and never forget their sacrifices. May God forever watch over them and protect them and their families. I will now read the 43 names of the veterans that lost their life from Butler County. Thomas Eugene Sizowitz, 1965. Vernon Douglas Andre, 1965. Charles Frederick Setzenfont, 1966. Alan George Lane, 1966. William Frederick Winters, 1966. Frances Claire Rummel, 1966. Luciana Paul Plezikov, 1966. James Thomas Steichner, 1967. Harold Eugene Morrow, 1967. Robert Charles Leonberg, 1967. Ronald Eugene Gerwig, 1967. Raymond Patrick Link, 1967. William L.G. Lesnick, 1967. Clyde Walter Klingensmith, 1967. Joseph George Cusick, 1967. Glenn Robert Wiley, 1967. Thomas Russell Kistner, 1967. Martin W. Walensky III, 1968. Stephen William Ziegler, 1968. John James McElroy, 1968. Paul Stasko Jr., 1968. Joseph Clarence Doyle, 1968. Gary Dwayne Reed, 1968. Walter Anthony Cicciani, 1968. William Roger Campbell, 1968. Charles William Seth, 1968. Donald Ray Burnside, 1968. Walter Edward Barnes, 1969. Richard Dennis Coyle, 1969. Gary Richard George, 1969. Edward Thomas Kiskowski, 1969. Gerald Wayne Shakely, 1969. Richard Harry Williams, 1969. James Robert Couch, 1969. Robert Lee Glasgow, 1969. Paul Edward Yangert, 1970. James Albert Bailey, 1970. Thomas Ralph Bierlein, 1970. Kenneth Allen Barger, 1971. David U. Smith, 1971. Merle Dwayne Brown, 1971. Edward Francis Heasley, 1971. Marlon McClellan Miller, 1971. Gentlemen, prepare to fold the flag. The first fold of our flag is a symbol of life. Fold. The second fold is a symbol of our belief in the eternal life. Fold. The third fold is made in honor and remembrance of the veterans departing our ranks who gave a portion of life for the defense of our country to attain a peace throughout the world. Fold. The fourth fold represents our weaker nature. For an American citizen trusting in God, it is to Him we turn in times of peace as well as in time of war for His divine guidance. Fold. The fifth fold is a tribute to our country. For in other words of Stephen Decatur, our country in dealing with other countries, may she always be right, but is still our country, right or wrong. Fold. The sixth fold is for where our hearts lie. It is with our hearts that we pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Fold. The seventh fold is a tribute to our armed forces, for it is through the armed forces that we protect our country and our flag against all enemies, whether they be found within or without the boundaries of our republic. Fold. The eighth fold is a tribute to the one who entered into the valley of the shadow of death, that we might see the light of day, and to honor Mother, for whom it flies on Mother's Day. Fold. The ninth fold is a tribute to the womanhood, for it has been through their faith, love, loyalty, and devotion that the characters of the men and women who have made this country great have been molded. Fold. The 10th fold is a tribute to Father, for He also has given His sons and daughters for the defense of our country since they were first born. Fold. The 11th fold, in the eyes of Hebrew citizen, represents the lower portion of the seal of King David and King Solomon, and glorifies in their eyes the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Fold. The 12th fold, in the eyes of Christian citizen, represents an emblem of eternity and glories in their eyes, God the Father, the Son, and Holy Ghost. Fold. The 13th fold, or when the flag is completely folded, the stars are uppermost, reminding us of our national motto, "In God We Trust." Fold. After the flag is completely folded and tucked in, it takes on the appearance of a cocked hat, ever reminding us of the soldiers who served under General George Washington, and the sailors and Marines who served under Captain John Paul Jones, who were followed by their comrades and shipmates in the armed forces of the United States, preserving for us the right, privileges, and freedoms we enjoy. Please place the folded flag on the POW MIA table.
Please detail, dismissed.
I want to thank the VFW 249, American Legion 778 and 117 for their flag folding ceremony, along with Sergeant Major retired Sam Zerzola. Also would like to announce the POW MIA table setting was done by Sam Loverick, Vietnam veteran and American Legion rider. At this time I will present a little bio on our guest speaker, Colonel Alex McClinchy, U.S. Marine Corps. Colonel McClinchy enlisted in the United States Marine Corps in November 1964, shortly after graduating from Bucknell University. He completed boot camp at Parris Island, South Carolina, and infantry training at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and received orders to the 3rd Marine Division in Vietnam, Republic of Vietnam, as an infantry rifleman. His orders were terminated upon his selection to Officers Candidate School, Quantico, Virginia. He was commissioned as 2nd Lieutenant in December 1965. Lieutenant McClinchy then attended Officers Basic School and upon graduation was selected as an infantry officer. He reported to the 1st Marine Division, Republic of Vietnam, in July 1966 and was assigned to Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 7th Marines as a rifle platoon commander. He was promoted to 1st Lieutenant in April 1967 and completed his combat tour in August 1967. Upon returning to the States, he was assigned to the 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and promoted to captain in October 1967. He served as company commander and later became the Battalion Operations Officers S3 until his release from active duty in December 1968. Captain McClinchy joined the Marine Corps Reserves in February 1969 and served continuously in various command and staff billets until his retirement in July 1996. In 1973, while serving as commanding officer of Lima Company, 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines, the company was selected as the outstanding ground company in the Marine Corps Reserves. During these years of service, he was fortunate to have numerous periods of extended active duty. The most significant billet was as tactics instructor at the Command and Staff College in Quantico, Virginia. Colonel McClinchy was promoted to Major in July 1975, Lieutenant Colonel in 1982, and Colonel in July 1988. His personal awards include Purple Heart with Gold Star, 2nd Award, the Meritorious Service Medal, the Combat Action Ribbon, along with numerous unit service and campaign awards. He is a graduate of the Amphibious Warfare College and the Command and Staff College, along with numerous courses at the Landing Force Training Command. He and his wife Molly reside in southern Butler County in Adams Township. He has 3 adult children, 2 adult stepchildren, and many grandchildren. I now present Colonel McClinchy.
Good evening. First of all, I have to set the record straight. I am not by any means a public speaker, and I don't do prepared speeches. So the reason I'm here is because I could not ignore a request from Sergeant Major Sam Zerzola and followed up by Jerry Puff. It just was not possible to ignore or decline their invitation. You heard my bio. It's better than it reads better than it probably is. But I was fortunate to have served in Vietnam early on in the war. from July of 66 to August of 67. We Marines at that time were highly motivated, and the war had not become unpopular in this country. All Marine second lieutenants, particularly the infantry officers and the artillery officers, were chomping at the bit to get to Vietnam. We actually had fights in the passageways at basic school for guys wanting to be infantry officers, believe it or not. At the time that I was there, I had a very limited perspective of the war. I did not know the big picture by any means. The only thing that I knew was what my platoon or my company, Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, were doing. As most of you all know, South Vietnam was divided into 4 corps areas, and they were Roman numerals, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I Corps, which was from Quang Ngai north to the DMZ, at the time I was there, was the Marines' responsibility. Later, the Army joined us. 2 Corps, which was the Central Highlands, 3 Corps in the area around Saigon, and 4 Corps down in the Mekong Delta. That's how the country was divided. Now, since departing Vietnam 50 years ago, my memory is not that great. However, from 2006 to 2014, I've been fortunate enough to have made 9 trips back to Vietnam as a tour leader. And 90% of the people who go on these tours are Vietnam veterans, their families, or they may be college students. For example, a group from the Citadel, a group from VMI went on these tours. One of the more interesting tours I had was the Naval Academy class of 1966. And that was a pretty impressive class. One of the class members was Lieutenant Colonel Ollie North. There were a number of flag officers in that class also. But given these 9 trips back to Vietnam, I've learned a great deal about the country, the war, and the people. I'll get into that toward the end, which will be fairly soon. My first 8 months was in a combat base south of Chu Lai on the east side of the Song Trabong River. And our company's sector of responsibility ran east out to the Nui Nam Tam Peninsula. Most of our activity was reinforced squad and platoon patrols. And the opposition was local VC elements and some main force VC units, not hardcore NVA. Our company ran about 20 patrols a day, and these patrols were either reinforced squad patrol, ambushes, listening posts. All this was meant to pacify, for lack of a better term, our area of responsibility. We also had battalion and multi-battalion operations. And we were located just north of the Operation Starlight area. Most of you Marines have all heard of Operation Starlight, which was the first major Marine operation of the Vietnam War. And that was in August of 1965. My last 5 months were spent in a combat base about 15 miles southwest of Da Nang, just below Hill 55. And our sector of responsibility was called Dodge City. And the main reason for that was because of the heavy NVA concentration and the large number of mines and booby traps, particularly bouncing Bettys. I'm not going to describe Bonds and Bettys. Most of you know what they are. We patrolled this area very heavily, but the VC and the NVA decided when and where they wanted to engage. We also participated in a large number of multi-battalion and multi-nation, meaning ARVN, Vietnamese Marines, and Korean Marines, joining us on operations such as Arizona and Operation Union 2. We took a lot of casualties. And I took more than my share in my platoon, particularly legs. Because of mines and booby traps, I lost 20 legs in my platoon. Some Marines were multiple legs. A Marine rifle platoon at full strength is 42 men. Sometimes my platoon was 20 or 22. In the last 2 months, I had 5 KIAs, and I carry this list with me at all times as a reminder, listing these 5 Marines. And every time I visit the wall, including yesterday, I go over there to their panel and row number and reach out to each of them. Now, since my tour ended in 1967, as I mentioned, there's some big events that I was not fortunate enough to participate. The first of these was Quezon, which started on 21 January 68 and was a 77-day siege. The 26th Marine Regiment was up against 3 NVA divisions. Now, put that into perspective. In the Marine Corps, 3 infantry regiments and an artillery regiment make up a division. Our divisions are a little larger than communist divisions, but still, it was a regiment against 3 divisions. And the NVA thought they were going to do well there because they looked back to 1953 to Dien Bien Phu. I've had the privilege of going to Dien Bien Phu on one of my tours. And Quezon was almost a carbon copy, as far as geography, to Dien Bien Phu. Completely surrounded by high mountains and hills, with a combat base down in the valley. But didn't work out that way. The Marines defended. They took tremendous casualties, but they defended and they held Quezon. That was the focus of the American command. General Westmoreland and MacPhee down there in Saigon, they thought that the NVA, that their primary objective was Quezon. Turned out that wasn't their primary objective. The Tet Offensive started like 10 days later on 31 January, and you heard the number of casualties that occurred on 31 January. 31 January, the Tet Offensive started, and the NVA assaulted throughout all of South Vietnam, but the biggest concentration was in the city of Hue. There were 10,000 NVA troops, and I don't know how many thousand VC. But eventually, after bitter street fighting, and you've all seen pictures, film, etc., the NVA were defeated. Now, the interesting point here is that was going on all of February of 1968 and into March. It really took the NVA 4 years to mount another big offensive, and that was the Easter Offensive of 1972. That started on March 30th. The NVA charged across the DMZ with infantry, tanks, and artillery. They also attacked through the Central Highlands, coming in from the Ho Chi Minh Trail to try to cut South Vietnam in half. Initially, the ARVN, the Army of South Vietnam, fell back. But they still had U.S. advisors, and they still had U.S. air, artillery, naval gunfire, and logistics support. And the NVA were soundly defeated. At that time, there were no American ground combat units in I Corps. So it was up to the South Vietnamese. And eventually, they prevailed. But they had our total support as far as supporting arms. Now, a little sidebar on this. When that attack started, the commanding general of the 1st ARVN Division jumped on a helicopter and took off. He just left. His advisor was a Marine Lieutenant Colonel by the name of Turley. And effectively, Colonel Turley took over that division because they were just totally disorganized. And he rallied the ARVN. And the ARVN finally stopped their retreat or retrograde movement and went into the offensive and drove the NVA back across the DMZ. There was a Marine captain by the name of John Ripley who was down in Dong Ha, which is south from the DMZ, and there's a bridge across the river there on Highway 1. There was a column of 42 NVA T-62 tanks barreling down the highway. And Captain Ripley, unbelievably, from the south side of the river, hand over like this, went under the bridge, placing explosives under the bridge, and blew the bridge, even though he was ordered not to. He earned the Navy Cross. Most of us feel he should have had the Congressional Medal of Honor. And Colonel Ripley died about 18 months ago. After that final success that the ARVN had, the next 3 years later was the spring offensive of 1975. And there, the ARVN had no U.S. support of any kind. The ARVN were routed. The Vietnamese Marines, of which there were only 2 battalions, fought valiantly, and when they ran out of ammo, they died in place. And we all know, and we've all seen pictures of 30 April 1975, when the NVA tanks crashed through the gate of the presidential palace in Saigon, and the war was over. Now, there's some interesting questions I have, and you probably have also. You know, at the end of the Korean War, which was 1953, we agreed to drawing a line at the 38th parallel and saying, okay, North Korea's up there, South Korea's down here, bad guys up there, good guys down here. In Vietnam, less than 12 years later, before we even started, we drew a line at the 17th parallel, creating a DMZ, saying bad guys up there, good guys down here. Didn't work either time, particularly when you look at Korea. What is it? 64 years later, and look at the situation we're in now. I have a little story that you'll find interesting. On one of my trips, I was in Pleiku, which is in Tu Corps, very near the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And we stopped at this cemetery because there were some school kids that had just walked by, and we saw this cemetery, so we stopped. We went there, and the caretaker and his wife were at the cemetery. And I had my Vietnamese counterpart. I do not speak Vietnamese, as much as I've tried to learn. It's a very difficult language, but I had my Vietnamese counterpart there, and we were into a conversation, and the wife told the guy to go put your uniform on. So it turns out this guy was an NVA major. He had been a private at Dien Bien Phu. In the communist Vietnamese retirement system, you get your check, but you still have to work. So his job was as caretaker for this cemetery. Well, after we got into a little more conversation, turns out he was my adversary in Dodge City, some 75 miles away. He didn't know me personally, but he knew all about Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. He and I aren't buddies on Facebook, I'll be honest. But it was very ironic that to just trip over or run into this guy. Since I'm on the subject of cemeteries, there's cemeteries throughout Vietnam. The sad part of it is once the NVA took over the country, they bulldozed all the urban cemeteries. Just bulldozed them all. And they have their own NVA and VC cemeteries. And I guarantee you there's over 100 of them in South Vietnam. They also created monuments. And they created these monuments on pieces of what we called our key terrain. Example, in Chu Lai, there's Hill 43, which is on the west side of the airfield, and that was a defensive position for us to protect the airfield. There's a big NVA monument on that hill. Hill 55, as I mentioned, where I was southwest of Da Nang, there's another huge NVA monument. I will say this though, going back there the number of times I have, the Vietnamese people, believe it or not, particularly down in the South, they like Americans. 75% of the people in Vietnam today were not alive during the American War. It's a very young country. And Papa San and other relatives did not make it. There aren't very many people my age or older. Capitalism in the South it's free enterprise. Mom and pop operations, not your typical communist country by any means. One last thing, there are a number of expat veterans, they number in the hundreds, that are living in Vietnam. Now, they either didn't come back or they came back and couldn't adjust or chose not to adjust and went back to Vietnam. And they live there now. And since they're 70 plus at this point, it's a dying breed. If you're interested in history or reading anything about Vietnam, I have two books that I would highly recommend. The first is Matterhorn, and it's written by a former Marine lieutenant by the name of Carl Marlantes. And the second one is Way, 1968, by Mark Bowden. And it's about 540 pages of small print, but it is an outstanding book. I'm about 2/3 of the way through it right now. It's just recently published, and it's very good. I want to thank everyone. I think you have a wonderful ceremony here. I went to the, when the wall was here, the beginning of July, down in Hampton, and they had nothing compared to what you folks have up here. You are to be commended. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Clemency, for your outstanding insight. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, that's so funny.
That concludes our evening ceremony. Thank you for attending. For people that want to know, this area will be open around the clock until Sunday noon. There'll be breakfast tomorrow morning at the 778 for any veterans that choose to go over there. I believe it's from 7 to around noon.
7 to 11.
7 to 11 tomorrow at American Legion 778 over by the tank. Thank you very much. God bless you all. God bless our veterans in harm's way, and God bless America.